HTJ.tax, the international tax firm for 6, 7, and 8-figure investors and entrepreneurs who are living that international life. Are you ready?
So if someone is working remotely in Australia for a US employer, they're still a full-time employee of this US company, not an independent contractor in Australia. Do they pay US Social Security charges on their salary or Australia? And they're tax resident in Australia?
Yes. So there are factual variables here, but on a high level, if I, for instance, I've been to the US on holidays, but I'm not a US citizen, don't have a green card, none of that. I could work as a full-time employee for a US company, and the US company, so I'm taxed here in Australia. The source of my employment income is where I physically am, notwithstanding that I'm paid by a US company. And as an Australian resident individual working in Australia, they are required to pay Australian superannuation. Now, that's different if I'm a secondee, and there is an agreement, I should say, between Australia and the US as to coverage for those types of payments. If I am a US citizen, I'm sent here for a period of time, it might be more than a 3-month short-term secondment. But as long as in those circumstances I continue to be paid in the US, then the US company doesn't also have to pay superannuation in relation to my time here. But short of that, the starting point is Australian resident working in Australia for a foreign company, it pays Australian superannuation.
Okay, so that's pretty clear. And of course, there's a totalization agreement between the US and Australia, meaning that they're not going to pay social charges on both sides. So, and since they are based in Australia, there is a case leveraging that tax treaty for them not to pay the social security charges in the US. But as I reflect on that question, and this kind of connects to a point that you made when you gave your intro. So this person is not working for an Australian company, they're working for an American company. Is there a risk that their presence on Australia's soil can constitute a permanent establishment to that US company?
Yes, and there is, and I'm not sure what the US equivalent is. We that is the Australian system, the Australian Taxation Office has both public rulings saying this is our stated view. They have private rulings where someone says, look, these are my circumstances. This is how I think I'll be taxed. What do you think? Yes or no? But they also have these products, well, they call them products, called ATO interpretive decisions. And they are not quite as formal, excuse me, as a public ruling, but it must have come about in someone's life. They've approached the tax office and they've said, there's a bit of an issue here. We're going to provide some public guidance as to how we would interpret this issue. Now, you would expect, most governments around the world, they'd be pretty pro-revenue. Any kind of grey area in the legislation or the case law, they'll kind of apply to benefit them. And look, to be fair, taxpayers do the reverse. But there is an ATO interpretive decision, an ATOID, albeit it relates to someone who was working in Australia, working from home actually, for a New Zealand company. And the outcome of that was that person working in their home study was taken to be a permanent establishment of the New Zealand company. But there are two critical things. One, in that instance, that individual was reimbursed for all of their expenses. So that allowed the ATO to take the view that, well, that study, that home study, is really available to the Kiwi company because they're footing the bill effectively. So short of that, if they weren't doing that, I'd say that that's a critical distinction. And therefore you're kind of differentiating the circumstances to that situation. But even if it is taken to be a PE, the next question is, well, what profit is attributable to that PE? So if that person, and in this instance, it was someone who handled the phones. So I'm not sure it was completely administrative, but in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't high value add services that we hear. So if that were the case, the threshold question, is there a PE? They get yes or no, hopefully no. If yes, well, what are they actually doing? How much value is being created here? And, what, if anything, can be transfer priced back to the mothership to legitimately reduce the profit that is attributable to Australian tax.
Gotcha. That's really helpful to know. Now, given that we live in unprecedented times, right? There's a health situation. We can't mention the name because it gets censored, right? But there's a health crisis, right? So for some people, I don't know whether it's this person's situation, right? But suppose that they were in Australia, not by choice, but they were unable to return, in this case, to the US. Would there be any sort of concession offered by the ATO?
Anecdotally, there has been. Even in any event, if you fall within our any of our residence tests, technically you're in. The next step is to look at a double tax agreement and the residency tiebreaker rules in terms of that agreement. And if you've got the first tiebreaker rule is usually, do you have a permanent home wherever you have a permanent home? Some people are wealthy enough to have a permanent home in both places, and then you go down to the next one. Ultimately, it gets down to wherever your personal and economic relations are closer. So looking at most people's circumstances, if they're stuck in Australia, their family, or the majority of their family, the majority of their assets are overseas, then even if the ATO didn't make any kind of administrative concession in that condition context, then you would still say in the DTA, well, looking at the tiebreaker rules, I fall within the domestic Australian rules as a US citizen or a continuing resident based on domicile or whatever it is in my home country. I'm a domestic resident under their system. The tiebreaker, this particular tiebreaker applies, and on that basis, I'm actually resident over there.
Okay. All right, that's super helpful to know.
So if you're a 6, 7, or 8-figure investor, entrepreneur, or business owner who needs a tailor-made solution from a qualified team of professionals, we can help you achieve the international lifestyle, the freedom, and even the tax savings you're looking for. Visit us at htj.tax and live that international life.